Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Hot on the heels of his controversial talks in Moscow with the Russian president, President Trump has invited President Putin for a summit at the White House. The news has taken many by surprise in Washington, not least the US head of intelligence, who was told while he was being interviewed on stage at a security conference. From Washington, Gary O'Donoghue reports.
1 week on, and still we don't know what these two men agreed to behind closed doors in their 2-hour-long meeting with only translators present. But after that joint public appearance, and Donald Trump seeming to side with Russia over his own intelligence services, he's faced a whirlwind of criticism, being forced to clear up and clarify his support for his own side.
Getting along with President Putin, getting along with Russia is a positive, not a negative. Right. Now, with that being said, if that doesn't work out, I'll be the worst enemy he's ever had. The worst he's ever had.
We have some breaking news. The White House has announced on Twitter that Vladimir Putin is coming to the White House in the fall.
And now this, even catching the man who runs the entirety of US intelligence off balance.
Say that again?
Vladimir Putin coming to the...
Did I hear you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's going to be special.
On the face of it, the invite to President Putin is baffling. Why risk another potential humiliation on home soil just weeks before key congressional elections? The answer is that around 7 out of 10 Republican voters believe the summit was a success, and getting them out to vote in the November polls will be crucial. But the president has faced scepticism on both sides of the political divide over his whole strategy towards Russia. And some opponents have called it a betrayal.
I found it shocking. I found it to be one of the most disgraceful, remarkable moments of kowtowing to a foreign leader by an American president that anyone has ever witnessed. And it wasn't just that it was a kind of surrender, it's that it is dangerous. The president stood there and did not defend our country.
And while the politicians get stuck in, the comedians can't resist it either.
Second meeting, because the first one went so well. It's just like the exciting sequel coming out this summer, Titanic 2, Here We Go Again.
All coming to a television screen near you soon. Gary O'Donoghue, BBC News, Washington.
President Trump has remained defiant about his surprise invitation to Russia's President Putin to visit the White House. It came as a big shock to the head of US intelligence. But Mr. Trump says getting along with his Russian counterpart is important, although insisted that he'd be the worst enemy he had if it didn't work out. From Washington, here's Juliette Bremner.
The meeting 5 days ago that caused uproar at home and abroad. An American president ignoring security breaches, offering a hand of friendship to Russia and remaining defiant.
Getting along with President Putin, getting along with Russia is a positive, not a negative. Right. Now, with that being said, if that doesn't work out, I'll be the worst enemy he's ever had.
For all the bickering and stuff that's going on.
But he clearly hadn't told his Director of National Intelligence he intended to issue a return invitation.
The White House has announced on Twitter that Vladimir Putin is coming to the White House in the fall.
Say that again?
Dan Coates has repeatedly warned of the dangers posed by Russia.
Did I hear you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's going to be special.
Since the end of the Cold War, when Ronald Reagan invited Mikhail Gorbachev, Russian presidents have been guests at the White House. In the 90s, Bill Clinton embraced Boris Yeltsin as the United States tried to foster better relations with a crumbling Soviet Union.
It's an indication of how happy we are to have you and your wife here with us.
President Putin himself was a guest of George W. Bush, But that was nearly 2 decades ago, before the Russian threat had re-emerged.
I think it's outrageous that the president is rewarding Putin with another meeting before the election, particularly since Dan Coats and other intelligence community leaders, and for that matter, the social media platforms, have indicated the Russians will be back.
Time magazine have illustrated the dangers of an ever closer Trump-Putin alliance. Whatever the reservations, the US president seems intent on making the former KGB spy his friend.
These are not just historical but ongoing cyber threats against the American elections. Intelligence chiefs have warned that they already suspect that they've been trying to disturb or target the congressional and Senate elections, which are due here in the autumn. And yesterday we heard from the Justice Department saying they were going to bypass politicians and directly warn the American people of future attacks.
Juliet, thanks.
Welcome to the White House, Vladimir Putin. That came as a total surprise to his top security officials, as Donald Trump issued an impromptu invitation to the Russian president to visit Washington. After a week of daily conflicting statements, Mr. Trump declared the two leaders get along well, although he insisted if things went wrong, he would become the Russian leader's worst enemy. Democrats are still demanding to know exactly what the pair actually agreed when they met in Helsinki earlier this week. Fatima Manji reports.
We have some breaking news. The White House has announced on Twitter that Vladimir Putin is coming to the White House in the fall.
Say that again?
That's the US Director of National Intelligence laughing in shock.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's going to be special.
Yet another surprise for the US intelligence community, still reeling after an unprecedented week. As well as trying to understand and preempt security threats, they're also trying to work out the behaviour of their own president. On Monday, he was called treasonous and weak for siding with Vladimir Putin over election interference.
President Putin, he just said it's not Russia. I will say this, I don't see any reason why it would be, but
By Tuesday, he'd spectacularly backtracked.
The sentence should have been, I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be Russia.
Damage control that so far hasn't played well on the cover of Time magazine or on Capitol Hill, with criticism from both sides. And news of a second summit at the White House hasn't helped.
One, I think it's outrageous that the president is rewarding Putin with another meeting before the election, particularly since Dan Coats and other intelligence community leaders, and for that matter, the social media platforms, have indicated the Russians will be back. My feeling is, again, this president's getting played.
He was a total patsy.
Overnight, the president was back on camera and back on message, insisting he has been and will be tough on Vladimir Putin.
There's a big deal about that. Getting along with President Putin, getting along with Russia's a positive, not a negative. Right. Now, with that being said, if that doesn't work out, I'll be the worst enemy he's ever had.
For now, it feels more best friend. With a sudden invitation to the White House to the leader of a nation President Trump now concedes is responsible for meddling in the last election. Russia, though, is pleased.
When we see that our leaders don't meet very often, of course we are for the agreement. Oh goodness, I mean dialogue. We're for constant dialogue and for our leaders communicating on a regular basis instead of sporadically in order to have a better understanding of all the issues and how to solve them.
Far from the alarm in Washington, D.C., across the plains of the U.S., Americans in every state have mere months to decide how they'll vote in the crucial congressional elections in November. Go along for the ride with Donald Trump, or take another direction that delivers Democrats control of Congress and with it more chances to stop the president. US intelligence officials believe Moscow is targeting those midterm elections just as it did in 2016. Now President Putin could be arriving in America just before those votes are cast.
Well, Fatima has been filming in Kansas City this week and joins us from there now. Well, Kansas is a Republican state. How do they see things differently there to, say, Washington?
Well, Christian, there's a storm gathering here in Kansas City, but I'm not sure it's of the political kind. Remember, the same thing can be viewed very differently from Capitol Hill and in Republican states. Remember that Donald Trump has been very clever in putting out a perception of fake news, and a lot of this can be viewed in the same light. You switch on Fox News this morning and they say the more they slam Donald Trump, the more popular he gets, and that really sums it up.
But it's not just Russia that is causing Donald Trump headaches today, is it?
That's right. In the last few hours, the New York Times has been reporting that a secret recording has been obtained by the FBI, detailing a conversation between Donald Trump and his former personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, just 2 months before the election. And in that conversation, they're discussing the payment of a former Playboy model who allegedly had an affair with Donald Trump. So not just embarrassing, though. This is important because the Department of Justice is carrying out an investigation into Michael Cohen to see if any of these payments that he allegedly made actually broke federal campaign laws. So this could be potentially very damaging. Now, the president's current lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, the former mayor of New York, has confirmed that this recording does exist, but he says that no payment was actually made. Now, Michael Cohen, the former lawyer, has actually once said that he would take a bullet for Donald Trump. He seems to have changed his tune. This morning he was meeting with a Donald Trump critic, Al Sharpton, and I think the last word really goes to the Reverend Al Sharpton, who is an adversary of Donald Trump, because he tweeted, "Stay tuned."
Thanks, Fatima.
I've been